Welcome to AQMD on the Air. I'm your host, Mark Carroll. Joining us today is Daniel Mazmanian, the current Bedrosian Chair in Governance and Director of the USC Judith and John Bedrosian Center on Governance and Public Enterprise. He has served as USC School of Policy, Planning and Development C. Irwin and Ione L. Piper Dean and Professor. And before joining USC, he served as the Dean of the School of Natural Resources and Environment at the University of Michigan, and previous to that, Director of the Center for Politics and Economics at the Claremont Graduate University. Professor Mazmanian, welcome.
Thank you.
Much of your current research focuses on the transition to sustainable communities. Can you tell us about your research and how it ties into some of the goals that AQMD has for achieving federal clean air standards?
Yes, I appreciate that question. It really goes to the heart of not only my research, but the, I think, future of AQMD and its role in the region, but also really for our society. Because if you think about the past 40 to 50 years, air quality management in our region, the AQMD has been the center of that in terms of carrying out public policies. It has used its regulatory authority, some would say top-down, but regulatory authority to change the behavior of a lot of firms, but also technology and the way people behave to accomplish the very challenging task of reducing air pollutants in our region. As it turns out, as we look to the 21st century, as huge a task as that has been, it's just the beginning in transforming our society, not only for Los Angeles and California, United States, but on a global scale to be more sustainable. And by which I mean is that despite our best efforts, our impacts on the environment, challenges to our natural resources bases are increasing as the human population is growing from 7 to 9 billion people. As California grows from its 37 to 38 to 60 million people in the coming 25 to 30 years. These are huge challenges, and we have to bring that in sync with the carrying capacity of those resources, with the negative consequences of development and the life we lead in terms of environmental harms, air pollution being one of them. So I think we're moving now from a period where an AQMD or other agencies that protect our environment have, if you will, been single-purposed to being multiple-purposed. And it's complicated even further because it's not just the regulatory agencies that have to be engaged, but we really have to think about our global economic position. So there's economic competitiveness, there's mobility and transportation, and on top of all that, there's our resources protection, and that's the sustainability we're talking about.
So when you focus on the sustainability and you're talking about mobility and these other aspects, what kind of policies need to be put into place to make this transition into sustainability for the 21st century?
I don't have a precise answer, but based on what I've seen so far, we need to step back a little bit from the very, as I say, media-focused specific policies, as well as transportation policies and economic as separate. We need what I would characterize as some really broader covering laws that set the compass. As an example, but only as an example, our climate change mitigation policy, AB 32 in California, requires all sectors of our society to come together in trying to reduce collectively our greenhouse gas emissions. It's not just air, it's not just transportation. So I'm thinking that we need those kinds of covering laws that focuses on this longer term sustainability, that brings together the awareness of our demands on the environment, awareness of the changing economic position of the region and the state, is sensitive to the needs for new technologies, and needs policy drivers. And what we lack right now, I think, are some of the policy drivers that have the kinds of incentives and future focus that, and I'll call that the covering law strategy, that's going to lead us toward the sustainability.
And an example of some of these policy drivers?
Well, as I say, AB 32 is one.
Okay.
I think it's probably for California the most important one we have today. But of course, it needs to be complemented with the others which say, but we still want to be economically competitive. We still are going to be absorbing population, and we need to do that through a series of not only goals, that's the covering law, but incentives. What's going to get you and me, to the extent we are, out of our cars and in the public transport? And regulation alone does not do that. You can prohibit me from driving, but that means I can't get to work. So you can't regulate me out of my car, but you can invest in new technologies and research and development to bring us into the zero emitting vehicles. And I know the AQMD's powering the future, looking for zero emitting goods movement strategies. So I think now it's a technology strategy that we really have to emphasize.
And how does the market play into this? I know you've talked previously about market-based environmental programs. AQMD has the Reclaim program, and CARB now has their GHG cap and trade program, and the European Union is dealing with this as well. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of some of those programs?
Sure. Let's take the Reclaim as a cap and trade model. After all, AQMD pioneered this long before it was brought up in terms of the national and international dialogue. And in fact, most people don't even know that our region has a cap and trade program in place, Reclaim, for the regional air quality management, not the climate change strategies.
Right.
In any event, I think that the Reclaim is a valuable example of both what can work as one tool, but also the limitations. What can work in the sense that Reclaim has, I believe, contributed significantly to the reduction of our emissions in this region without driving out business and industry, allowing market choices to be made, using cost incentives to gradually reach our emission reduction targets. That's the good news. Mm-hmm. The challenges, at least in my observing of Reclaim, is it's required an extraordinary administrative capacity to monitor, to enforce. It's required a lot of the industries involved to change what they do so they themselves can keep track of and report accurately their emissions. So it's a high technology strategy in that sense, and not everybody around the globe has that capacity. And then you think about the monitoring and observation. Well, the South Coast AQMD, as large as it is, it's not global. So if we go to a global level of a cap and trade, you have to think very hard how we're going to monitor and administer that. Mm-hmm. Also, one of the theoretical promises of a cap and trade is that it will encourage the introduction of new technologies. Well, the academic and research on Reclaim is it really hasn't done that. I think for that we need investment. That's your R&D to get the technological leaps forward that we need in the coming 30 to 40 years to actually become more sustainable. And simply by using a cap and trade which reduces costs, allows for efficiencies, but isn't really technology driving as some had thought it might be. Mm-hmm. We need to have a separate policy for that technology driving, or a complementary policy.
One of the things you've mentioned are incentives, but the public sector only has so much money to provide for moving towards those new technologies. Is there an opportunity for the private sector and the public sector to work together to help spur on the push towards those new technologies?
Let me go back to my comment about framing, because framing was not about a regulatory policy. It was about setting a context within which private participants know where the public is moving, where policy is moving, and therefore use its own innovations and desire for market share to change. Example, the extent to which we are going to develop 33% alternative energy for the state of California, that's a framing issue. We didn't say how we're going to do it.
Right.
We said, let's create a vision, then a path forward. We have some regulations that are going to require it, but we're not telling energy generators how to do it. We're in fact encouraging entrepreneurs to come into the system. We're letting a market lead us there in the particulars. And you're going to let you and me choose through our purchasing what kind of vehicles we have, what kind of trade-offs they are, but we're saying overall they have to lead to that end. So this is a framing within which markets operate. That's what we need.
Okay. You talked about setting a vision. What is your vision for Southern California over the next 20 years, and how we achieve a more sustainable region, and what role do agencies have to play, and what role do the private sector have to play in this?
Well, I'm a great believer in the philosophy of what's called smart growth. By smart growth, we mean more and more people are moving to urban areas. we have to accommodate them, and we should. I have to in the sense of they want to be here, and we should in the sense that all the analysis shows that we have the smallest footprint, that is, we consume the less energy, resources, land space by living in a more compact way. Now this can be elegant or it can be modest, but it's compact. And you know, we have older cities on the planet that because of their earlier starting are compact. We have places like San Francisco in California that's compact because of the geographic boundaries. Our challenge is to take places where there's a larger landmass, but if you will, contain them without that sprawl, so that we get those efficiencies, we get the reduction in need for using energy, for using greater transportation, but we still have a wonderful quality of life.
How do you undo the sprawl that's already been done, though?
I don't think you're going to undo the sprawl. I think what we're going to do is try and keep it as our parameter. Keep in mind, we are growing in population. If you said, well, the projection is a reduction in population, we could talk about that strategy. We're not facing that. We're facing a population growth, and I see no policy nor human will to dramatically curtail those projections. It'll take us a couple billion more. So really our challenge now is as the globe's population, not just Californians, but people move to urban areas. This is the century of urban areas. How do we design them more compactly, more efficiently, and most importantly for us, how do we redesign or continue to evolve in our region in a more compact manner? We have some policies heading in that direction. I mentioned covering law. We do have our SB 375, which is the metropolitan planning strategies that requires a sustainable cities strategy within each of our major regions. San Diego has already had its approved, and it's quite impressive because it follows basically a smart growth while reducing our impact strategy. I mean, that's in the plan. How do we get there? All those micro choices that we're going to make.
That's great. Professor Daniel Mazmanian, thank you very much for joining us today and for your insight and your commitment to helping achieve more sustainable and healthier communities in Southern California.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, that's our show. I'm Mark Carroll. Thanks for watching. Visit us at cleanairconnections.org to learn how you can help us clean the air that we breathe.
Let's work together.